Each time you learn something, your consciousness becomes something different. And the question you will ask, and the questions you ask will be different. You don't know what the next appropriate question will be when you haven't yet assimilated the earlier answers. This is from a guy called, I meant to write his name up here, something Pete. He's a nutrition guy, Dr. something Pete, P-E-A-T, Dr. Pete, a nutrition guy. But he gets something here. Your consciousness is always transforming. And as your consciousness transforms, you see the world differently as it moves, which means you are going to think differently from that place, and you're going to ask different questions from that place. If you're involved in doing transformative coaching with people, one of the big sticking points is going to be, if you're transforming their mind or their consciousness, the way they think a short while into the coaching will be different from how they were thinking at the beginning, which is going to mean they're going to want different things. Because as your consciousness transforms, everything transforms. Now, that's an interesting thing when people start talking about evolving consciousness. What exactly does that mean? Oh, crikey, there's a whole symposium on that, a whole debate to be had. For me, I just keep it simple. Core consciousness is your awareness. It's a sense of I am and I can. A sense of being and a sense of agency. That's core consciousness. But consciousness looks at the world and sees it undifferentiated, like a baby sees the world undifferentiated. There's no ability to make distinctions. And in a sense, the distinctions aren't really real. But how we interact with the world is dictated by the distinctions we're able to make about it. And every distinction creates choice. Have you ever thought about that? Distinction is what creates choice. Without distinction, there is no choice. Because a distinction is this versus this. It creates a delineation between something or within something. So all of our choices are governed by our ability to make distinctions. We start off making no distinctions, not even between ourselves and the world around us. And we have no ability to really have any power in the world. We can't bring ourselves to bear upon the world as babies, We have to learn to bring ourselves to bear upon the world. So we build a map of the world, which is a set of distinctions about the world that enable us to interact with it more or less effectively. So I see evolving consciousness as being an enrichment, an ongoing enrichment of how we see the world. Right? It's like having a richer and richer map. The richer your map, the one that enables you to make more distinctions, so you end up with an undifferentiated. In Taoist cosmology, they say in the beginning there was Wu-Ji, nothingness, undifferentiated mass. And then from Wu-Ji comes Tai-Ji, which is yin and yang, right? Differentiation of two. Now that's interesting, because when a baby is born, everything is undifferentiated. And then there's a distinction made, and some might say the first distinction is between self and other, between what is me and what is everything else. So initially, I can't tell the difference between my flailing hand and the flip chart. They're all blue. I don't get that that's somehow a part of me and that's not. But one of the first distinctions that babies make is between the difference between themselves and the world around, or at least themselves and their caregiver. So you have nothingness to start with, and then you get this differentiation of two. So the Taoist cosmology says in the beginning there is Wu-Ji, nothingness. And from Wu-Ji comes Tai-Ji. And from Tai-Ji comes the 10,000 things. Which, as I understand it, in that culture, 10,000 is a phrase used for, basically means infinite. So what you've got is a set of ever enriching distinctions, more thingification. So the richer you get in your distinction making, the more your consciousness becomes elevated, the more you're able to get more and more subtle, the more subtlety you have, the more maneuverability you have, the more nuance you have. You don't get to go back. It's what we were saying in the break. So a socialized mind has more richness and more nuance in their map of the world and their meaning making than does the self-sovereign mind. And however jealous you might be, you don't get to unmake a distinction you have made in your meaning making. You don't get to undo it. You may get to make a further distinction within it, or a further distinction that helps you transcend it. So this is what elevating consciousness is. As consciousness elevates and shifts, as you see the world in richer and richer ways, the questions you formulate, the understandings you have are going to necessarily evolve. So when you're working with somebody, their outcome will be constantly shifting if you're doing evolutionary work. If someone's outcome is not constantly shifting and they're stuck doggedly with the same outcome, and they want it resolved in exactly the same way, that's a pretty good sign nothing is changing. Right? So if I hit a problem and we don't resolve it, and yet that person is still formulating the problem and the solution in exactly the same way, I know that we've done zero work. I don't mind hitting a problem and failing to resolve it and having that person now experiencing it very differently and seeing a different set of choices and now having a different question. That's good, because we're moving. So that's worth being aware of.